Everything you have been taught about the minimum wage says the same thing. Set it above the market rate and you destroy jobs. And in a normal competitive market, that is exactly right. But there is one situation, a favourite of AQA examiners, where raising the minimum wage actually creates jobs and raises pay at the same time. Get this diagram right, and it is a guaranteed evaluation banker, so let me show you. In a normal competitive market, the textbook rule holds. A minimum wage above the going rate causes unemployment. But in a monopsony, the result flips. By the end of this, you will see exactly why a higher minimum wage can raise pay and jobs at the same time. Quick recap first. A monopsony is a labour market with one dominant buyer of labour. So the employer, not the market, sets the wage. If you have not watched my monopsony video, watch that first, because today builds straight on top of it. Let's start with a normal competitive labour market. Many firms, many workers, and no single employer big enough to push the wage around. The wage settles where the demand for labour, the MRP, meets the supply of labour. That gives us the competitive wage and the competitive level of employment. Hold on to that point. Now change one thing. Instead of many employers, there is just one big buyer of labour, a monopsony. Think of the NHS as effectively the only large employer of nurses, or a small town where one giant warehouse is the only serious employer for miles. You take what they offer. Here is the bit students drop marks on. To hire one more worker, the monopsonist has to raise the wage and pay it to everyone. So the cost of one extra worker, the marginal cost of labour, is higher than the wage itself. That is why MCL sits above the supply curve. A profit-maximising firm hires where the cost of the last worker equals the revenue it brings in, so the monopsonist employs where MCL meets MRP. But it only pays the wage needed to attract that many workers, read off the supply curve, lower down. Compared with the competitive market, both employment and pay are lower. Now the government sets a minimum wage at the old competitive wage. Below that line, the firm cannot pay less, so the cost of labour is flat up to where it meets the supply curve. The new marginal cost of labour is that flat line. Then it jumps back up to the old steep curve. The firm hires where this new cost meets MRP, which is back at the competitive point. So employment rises from the monopsony level back up to the competitive level, and the wage rises too. Higher pay and more jobs from the very policy that would have caused unemployment in a competitive market. Why does it work? The minimum wage removes the firm's power to push wages down by hiring fewer people. Once it can no longer drive the wage down, there is no reason to hold employment back, so it takes on more workers. To get the marks in a 25 marker, give the nuance. It depends where the wage is set. Between the monopsony and competitive wage, pay and jobs both rise. Exactly at the competitive wage, employment is maximised. Set it too high, above the competitive wage, and you are back to job losses. Think of it like Goldilocks. Too low and you barely help. Just right at the competitive wage and you maximise employment. Too high and you are back to the old story of job losses. 2 evaluation points for the top band. First, it only works if the market genuinely has monopsony power, like the care sector or one-employer towns. Many markets are not like that. Second, the government cannot see the competitive wage, so it might set it wrong. And firms can cut hours or training, or replace workers with machines. For a real A-star flourish, bring in the evidence. Card and Krueger's famous study of fast food workers found that a higher minimum wage did not cut employment. Exactly what monopsony theory predicts. That links theory to the real world. 3 things to take away. 1. In a monopsony, the firm hires where MCL meets MRP but pays the lower wage off the supply curve. 2. A minimum wage flattens the cost of labour, so it can raise wages and employment. 3. It all depends on where the wage is set. If that made the monopsony diagram click, subscribe. Next up is the price discrimination walkthrough. Drop any questions in the comments.